What happens to a woman's body after a long period without intimacy? I need to start with a truth that is going to surprise you. When a woman goes a long time without intimacy, what happens isn't what you imagine. She doesn't get desperate. She's not anxiously waiting for someone to show up. In fact, the exact opposite happens. And it's precisely this opposite that confuses most men over 50. I'm going to tell you exactly what science and psychology reveal about this silent process. And look, once you understand this, you'll realize why so many relationships go cold for no apparent reason, why that incredible woman seems so emotionally distant, and mainly why your attempts to get close again are not working. The truth is that the female body was designed to seek balance always. When intimacy disappears from a woman's life for a prolonged period, something fascinating happens in her nervous system. Desire doesn't vanish. It reorganizes. It adapts. You see, in the first few months without sex, there might even be some frustration, some longing. But the human brain is a survival machine. It doesn't let you suffer eternally for something that isn't available. So, the nervous system starts an automatic regulation process. First crucial point, the threshold for emotional activation increases. Let me explain what this means in practice. When a woman has intimacy regularly, her nervous system is sensitive to small signals, a touch on the arm, a lingering look, a deep conversation. All of this activates an emotional and even physical response. But when these stimuli stop coming, the brain adjusts the sensitivity. It's like when you enter a dark room. At first you can't see anything, but little by little your eyes adapt. With female desire, something similar happens, only in reverse. The system learns not to react to small stimuli. So that charming smile of yours, that kind compliment, that attempt to create a connection, all of that might be going completely unnoticed, not because she doesn't like you, but because her nervous system has raised the filter. Now, much stronger signals are needed to register the same internal response. And here is the second point that few men understand. Desire turns inward. When desire is expressed frequently, it remains flexible. It stays focused outward, seeking connection, seeking a response. But when it doesn't find an outlet for a long time, an inversion happens. It stops looking externally. This doesn't mean the woman has lost interest in intimacy. It means that intimacy has stopped being an organizing priority of her emotional life. Other things have occupied that space: stability, predictability, calm. And do you know what the most confusing part of all this is? To her, this change doesn't feel like a loss. It feels like control. It feels like emotional maturity. It feels like inner strength. That's why when you perceive that distance growing, you interpret it as coldness, as lack of interest. But internally for her, that is balance. It's peace. It's the system functioning perfectly. Third fundamental point, the need for external validation decreases drastically. Look, this is revolutionary. When a woman lives without intimacy for a long time, she stops depending on the male gaze to feel balanced. She develops a deep emotional self-sufficiency. This creates independence, yes, but it also creates an invisible barrier because desire that doesn't need an external response is not easily expressed. It stays contained, tucked away, silent. And then you try to get close with emotional availability, with affection, with attention, and it seems that nothing works. Not because you're doing it wrong, but because you're trying to feed a system that learned not to be hungry. If you're finding this useful so far, leave a like so I know this type of content makes sense to you. This knowledge saves relationships. Now, the fourth point is where most men get completely lost. The urgency disappears. You grew up in a time where the signs were clear, where interest showed itself, where sexual tension was palpable. So, when you meet a woman who seems too calm, too balanced, you don't know how to interpret it. You assume she's not interested, or that there's something wrong with you, or that the moment has passed. But reality is much more neutral than that. Her nervous system simply reached a state of low reactivity, and systems in balance resist change. Not by conscious choice, but by neurological economy. The brain doesn't want to spend energy reorganizing something that is already working. It's exactly about this depth of understanding that I dive into in my complete guide, Secrets of Attraction. There, I detail not only what happens, but mainly how you navigate these dynamics in an intelligent and magnetic way. The link is in the description. But let's get to the final point, the most important of all. Silence is not a message. You are trained to interpret signals. So when there is silence, you look for meaning, you look for reasons, you try to decipher what is wrong. But in this specific context, silence is not communication. It is simply the absence of need. When nothing is necessary, nothing is signaled. And this leaves you without references, without clues, without knowing how to act. Most men interpret this as rejection, as a closed door, as game over. But psychologically, it's just a system in a state of regulation, and regulation is not the same as closing down. So what you need to understand is this: living without sex doesn't empty a woman, it reorganizes her. The emotional system becomes quieter, more introspective, less reactive. And this reorganization is not a conscious decision, it is a biological adaptation. That's why attraction can seem distant even when respect remains. That's why warmth can feel muffled even when comfort exists. That's why connection can feel calm but not alive. Now you know what's really happening. And knowledge is power. The power not to take it personally. The power to adjust your approach. The power to create real connection, not just expectation. Subscribe to the channel because every week I bring observations like this, which transform confusion into clarity. You deserve relationships that work. And that starts by understanding the psychology that nobody taught you. Until the next revelation,